I spot invisible cracks in skyscrapers for a living, yet I missed the collapse of my 30-year marriage. I thought I was caring for a paralyzed wife until a doctor pointed at an X-ray and asked about one specific Tuesday. That question revealed she had been faking her illness for 2 years to steal millions. Drop a comment. What would you do if you discovered the person sleeping next to you was a monster planning your destruction? My name is James Garcia, and I have spent 40 years of my life studying the precise moment when things fall apart. I am a forensic structural engineer. When a bridge collapses into a river or a high-rise balcony shears off the side of a building, I am the man they call to sift through the rubble. I look for the microscopic stress fractures, the rusted bolts, the fatigue in the metal that whispered a warning long before the catastrophe occurred. I understand load-bearing capacities. I understand the physics of failure. I understand that even the strongest steel has a breaking point if you apply enough pressure over enough time. Standing in the freezing rain on the banks of the Ohio River last month, staring at the twisted skeleton of a collapsed overpass, I realized something terrifying. I was looking at myself. The steel girders had not snapped because of a single, violent impact. They had failed because of cycle fatigue. Year after year of vibration of temperature shifts of carrying heavy loads day in and day out without a break. That was me. I was the tired metal. I was the corroded bolt holding everything together, praying I did not shear off. I am 62 years old, but lately I feel 80. I should be in the prime of my golden years. I should be traveling through Tuscany or fishing in the Keys. Instead, I am living a life of quiet desperation, confined to the four walls of my own home, watching the woman I love fade away by the inch. 2 years ago, my wife, Maria, was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive motor neuron disorder. It was a sentence that no judge would hand down to a murderer. It started with a stumble in the kitchen, then a cane, then a walker, and finally the wheelchair. Maria is 52, 10 years younger than me. She was vibrant, a dancer, a woman who filled a room with her laughter. Now she is a prisoner in her own body, and I am her warden, her nurse, and her lifeline. I retired early from my firm Garcia and Partners to care for her. It was not a choice. It was a duty. I designed skyscrapers that could withstand earthquakes, so I told myself I could design a life that could withstand this disease. I re-engineered our home in the suburbs of Chicago. I did not just install a ramp. I gutted the place. I installed a hospital-grade elevator that moved silently between floors. I put in voice-activated lighting and temperature controls, so Maria would not have to struggle with switches. I installed a state-of-the-art camera system in every hallway and common room connected to my phone, so that if I was in the garden or the garage, I could see her. I wanted to make sure she was safe. I wanted to be the perfect husband. But perfection is heavy. Caregiver burnout is a term doctors use, but words are too light to describe the reality. It is a hollowing out of the soul. It is waking up at 4 in the morning to change sheets because of an accident, whispering that it is okay, while your wife cries in humiliation. It is blending food because she is too tired to chew. It is the isolation. The friends stop calling because they do not know what to say. The invitations stop coming because everyone knows we cannot go. It is just me and Maria, trapped in a beautiful high-tech cage. Maria sees it. She sees the bags under my eyes that are dark as bruises. She sees the tremor in my hand when I pour her tea. "I am such a burden to you, James," she said to me just last week. We were in the sunroom. She was sitting in her motorized chair, a blanket tucked around her legs. Her legs used to be strong-toned from years of salsa dancing. Now, beneath the wool, they were thin and atrophied. Or so I believed. "Don't say that," I replied, forcing a smile. I am good at forcing smiles now. It is part of the job description. You are my wife, in sickness and in health. Remember. She looked out the window at the gray sky, a single tear tracking down her cheek. You should be golfing. You should be running the company. Instead, you are wiping my face. I hate this, James. I hate what I have become. I just want to get better. For you. That is the hook she always used. For you. She did not want the expensive treatments for herself, she claimed. She wanted them so she could be a wife to me again. That is why we were looking into the clinic in Zurich. They promised a revolutionary stem cell therapy. It was experimental. It was not covered by insurance, and it cost a fortune. I had already burned through our liquid savings remodeling the house and paying for private nurses who Maria eventually fired because she said she only felt comfortable with me. To pay for Zurich, I had to make a move I never thought I would make. I had to sell my equity. That brings me to Marcus. Marcus is 35 years old. I hired him straight out of university. He was brilliant, ambitious, and hungry. I saw myself in him. I mentored him, promoted him, and eventually made him a junior partner. He was the son I never had. In the last 2 years, as I faded into the background to care for Maria, Marcus stepped into the spotlight. He ran the day-to-day operations. He kept the clients happy. He came over for dinner 2 nights before the accident. He sat at our mahogany dining table, loosening his tie, looking every bit the young tycoon. "James, you look exhausted," Marcus said, leaning forward. His voice was laced with concern. He glanced at Maria, who was struggling to lift a spoon to her mouth. I reached over and gently helped her wiping a drop of soup from her chin. Marcus looked away, as if the intimacy of her disability was too painful to watch. "I am fine, Marcus," I lied. "Just a long week." "It has been a long 2 years," Marcus corrected. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "I have the valuation ready for the share buyout. It is a fair price, James. More than fair. It will cover the Zurich treatment and leave you with enough to ensure Maria has the best care for the rest of her life. But we need to move fast. The board is getting restive. They want a singular leadership voice. They want me to take the helm officially." I looked at the papers. This company was my baby. I built it from a basement office into a multi-million-dollar firm. Signing it away felt like cutting off my own arm. "Do it, James," Maria whispered. Her voice was weak, breathless. She reached out and placed her hand on mine. Her skin felt cool. "Please. If there is a chance I can walk again, if there is a chance I can cook you dinner again, we have to take it. Marcus is right. You need to rest." I looked at Marcus. He nodded solemnly. "I will protect your legacy, James. You know I will. But right now your priority has to be Maria." I trusted him. I trusted her. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. If I sold the shares, I would have the money. We could go to Switzerland. Maybe I could fix this. I could repair the cracks in our lives. "I will sign," I said. "Give me a few days to have my lawyer look over the fine print just for form's sake." Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second, a micro fissure in his composure, before smiling. "Of course. Take your time. But do not wait too long. The offer expires at the end of the month." I should have seen the rush for what it was. Pressure. But I was too tired to analyze the data. I was operating on emotional fumes. Then came Tuesday night. It was one of those Midwest storms that shakes the foundations of the house. The wind was howling off Lake Michigan, battering the windows with sheets of rain. Thunder rattled the silverware in the drawers. I hate storms now. They remind me of chaos, of things I cannot control. Maria had insisted I sleep in the guest room down the hall. "My back is killing me, James," she had said around 9 o'clock. "I am going to be tossing and turning all night. I will just keep you awake. You need your sleep." "I do not mind," I had protested. I hated leaving her alone. "Please," she begged. "I feel guilty enough as it is. Let me at least give you a night of peace. Take one of those sleeping pills the doctor gave you. Just for tonight." I was so desperate for rest that I agreed. I kissed her on the forehead, tucked the duvet around her frail shoulders, and went to the guest room. I took the pill. I fell into a deep chemical sleep, the sound of the rain fading into a dull hum. I do not know what time it was when the sound woke me. It was not thunder. It was a thud. A heavy, sickening crash that vibrated through the floorboards. It was the sound of a structural failure. I shot up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The drug made my head swim, leaving me groggy and disoriented. "Maria," I called out. Silence. Then a low, guttural moan. Adrenaline cut through the fog in my brain. I scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over my own feet. I ran into the hallway. The lights were off. I sprinted toward the master bedroom. "Maria!" I threw open the door and slapped the light switch. The scene froze in my mind like a crime scene photograph. The wheelchair was upright by the bed, but Maria was not in it. She was lying face down on the hardwood floor near the bathroom door, 6 feet away from the bed. She was crumpled in a heap, her legs twisted at awkward angles. A dark pool of blood was spreading slowly from a gash on her forehead, where she had hit the corner of the nightstand. "Oh, God!" I gasped. I dropped to my knees beside her. "Maria, Maria, can you hear me?" She rolled over slowly, her face contorted in agony. Blood ran down into her eye. She looked terrified. "James," she sobbed. "James, it hurts." "Do not move," I commanded, my hands shaking as I pulled my phone from my pocket. "I am calling 911. "I am sorry," she wept, clutching my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong, born of panic, I assumed. I needed to use the bathroom. I didn't want to wake you. I thought I could transfer myself to the chair. I thought I was strong enough." My heart broke. She had tried to crawl. She had tried to drag herself to the bathroom just to spare me the trouble of waking up. The guilt hit me harder than the sight of the blood. I had been sleeping. I had been unconscious in the other room while my wife dragged her paralyzed body across the floor like a wounded animal. "Shh. It is okay," I whispered, dialing the emergency number. "I have got you. Help is coming." "My leg!" she cried out, clutching her left ankle. "James, my leg feels like it is on fire." I looked at her ankle. It was swelling rapidly, turning an angry purple. "Dispatch, this is James Garcia," I barked into the phone, my voice trembling but authoritative. "My wife has fallen. She is a paraplegic. Possible head trauma. Possible fracture. We are at 1242 Oakwood Drive. Send an ambulance immediately." The next 10 minutes were a blur of misery. I grabbed a towel and pressed it to her forehead to staunch the bleeding. She whimpered with every breath. I stroked her hair, whispering empty promises that everything would be all right. I felt like a failure. I had built a smart house. I had installed cameras. I had elevators. And yet she had fallen on a simple hardwood floor because I was not there to lift her. When the paramedics arrived, they were efficient and professional. They put a collar on her neck. They splinted her leg. "We need to get her to St. Jude's," one of the paramedics said as they loaded the stretcher. "Her vitals are stable, but that leg looks bad." I climbed into the back of the ambulance with them. The siren wailed, cutting through the storm. I held Maria's hand the entire way. She was drifting in and out of consciousness, murmuring my name. "I am here, baby," I said, squeezing her fingers. "I am right here. I am never leaving you alone again." I meant it. As the ambulance swayed and bumped over the wet roads, I made a silent vow. I would sell the company. I would sign Marcus's papers tomorrow. I would take the money and take her to Switzerland. I would dedicate every remaining second of my life to ensuring she never felt this pain again. I looked at her face, pale and streaked with blood. I saw a victim. I saw a martyr. I saw the love of my life broken by a cruel universe. I did not know then what I know now. I did not know that the human body does not lie, even if the mouth does. I did not know that bones tell stories that tears cannot wash away. I sat there holding the hand of a woman. I would have died for completely unaware that the X-ray machine waiting for us at the hospital was about to reveal a truth sharper than any knife. I was the engineer who had missed the crack, and the bridge was already falling. I just had not hit the water yet. St. Jude's private hospital smells of lavender and rubbing alcohol, a scent designed to mask the underlying odor of anxiety that permeates every waiting room in the world. I sat in a leather armchair that cost more than my first car, staring at a generic abstract painting on the wall. It was a swirl of angry reds and confused blues. It looked exactly how I felt. The clock on the wall ticked with a rhythmic, mocking precision. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Each tick was a hammer strike on my nerves. It had been 2 hours since they wheeled Maria through the double doors, marked authorized personnel only. 2 hours of silence. 2 hours of my mind replaying the sickening sound of her body hitting the floor, the image of blood on her forehead, the way she whimpered in the back of the ambulance. I closed my eyes and tried to retreat into the past, searching for a memory to anchor me. I thought back to our honeymoon in Cabo San Lucas 30 years ago. I remembered Maria in a white sundress, dancing on the sand, while a local band played a fast-paced rhythm. She moved like water fluid and effortless. She had pulled me up laughing, trying to teach me the steps, but I was stiff, an engineer made of right angles, trying to move in circles. She had kissed me, then tasting of salt and margaritas, and whispered that she would dance for both of us. That memory felt like a knife now. That woman, that vibrant creature of motion, had been replaced by the fragile figure I had just seen strapped to a gurney. I rubbed my face with my hands, feeling the rough stubble on my chin. I was failing her. I was failing the only job that mattered. Mr. Garcia. The voice was low baritone and serious. I snapped my head up. Dr. Alistair Thorne stood in front of me. He was a tall man, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair cut with military precision and wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his intense, slate-gray eyes. I knew Dr. Thorne by reputation before I knew him in person. He was the head of orthopedic trauma at St. Jude's, a man who rebuilt shattered athletes and car crash survivors. He was the best. That was why I brought Maria here. I stood up, my knees cracking slightly. Doctor, how is she? The head wound, is it a concussion? Is there swelling? Dr. Thorne did not answer immediately. He held a tablet in his hand, his grip tight, his knuckles white. He looked at me, not with the sympathetic gaze of a doctor, delivering bad news about a patient, but with the calculating look of a detective interrogating a suspect. Her head wound is superficial, Mr. Garcia, Thorne said, his voice flat. 4 stitches, a mild concussion. She is sedated and resting comfortably. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. The tension in my shoulders dropped 2 inches. Thank God. Thank you, doctor. Can I see her? Not yet, Thorne said. He did not move. He did not blink. We need to talk, privately. Follow me. It was not a request. He turned on his heel and walked toward a small consultation room off the main hallway. I followed him, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Why the secrecy? If she was fine, why did he look like he was about to pronounce a death sentence? The room was small, lit by harsh fluorescent strips. A light box hung on the wall. Thorne closed the door and locked it. That sound, the click of the lock, sent a shiver down my spine. Sit down, James, he said. He used my first name. That was new. I sat. Doctor, you are scaring me. What is going on? Is it her condition? Has the paralysis spread? Thorne walked over to the light box and tapped his tablet. A digital image appeared on the screen. It was an X-ray. It showed the skeletal structure of a lower leg, the tibia, the fibula, and the complex cluster of bones that make up the ankle. This is the scan we took of your wife's left leg 40 minutes ago, Thorne said. She was complaining of extreme pain in her ankle, so we imaged it to check for fractures from the fall tonight. I leaned in, my engineering eyes automatically scanning the image for structural integrity. I see it, I said, pointing to a faint, jagged line running across the distal tibia. A fracture. She must have broken it when she fell out of bed. God, her bones must be so brittle from lack of use. Thorne turned to look at me. His expression was unreadable. Mr. Garcia, I need you to answer a question for me, and I need you to be absolutely precise. Think carefully before you speak. Okay, I said, confused. Who was with your wife last Tuesday? I frowned. The question made no sense. Tuesday. That was 3 days ago. I know what day it was, Thorne snapped. Who was with her? Who was in your house? I said instantly. Just me. I am with her every day. I am her sole caregiver. We do not have nurses anymore. Was she alone at any point? Did she leave the house? No, I said, getting irritated. She is paralyzed, doctor. She cannot leave the house unless I carry her to the van. And I was home all day Tuesday. It was raining. We watched old movies. Why are you asking me this? Thorne stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for something deceit, maybe, or madness. Finally, he sighed, a heavy sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 bad diagnoses. Then, this timeline does not add up, he whispered. What timeline? Thorne turned back to the X-ray. He zoomed in on the fracture line I had pointed out. James, look at this fissure. Really look at it. You are an engineer. You know materials. What do you see around the edges of the break? I squinted. I saw the break, yes, but around the jagged edges, there was a faint cloudiness, a white fuzz. It looks soft, I said. That is osteoblast activity, Thorne said. That is the beginning of a callus formation. It is calcium deposition, the body's natural welding process. I stared at the image. I knew about welding. I knew about setting times for concrete. I knew that biological processes like chemical reactions followed a strict chronological order. Wait, I said, my voice trembling. Calcium deposits do not form instantly. That takes time. Exactly, Thorne said. If she broke her ankle tonight when she fell out of bed, this fracture would be clean. Sharp edges, no cloudiness. But this fracture is healing, James. Based on the level of calcification, this injury is between 72 and 96 hours old. I did the math in my head. 72 hours ago. Tuesday, I whispered. Tuesday, Thorne confirmed. Your wife did not break her ankle falling out of bed tonight. She broke it 3 days ago. My mind raced, trying to fit this data into the model of my reality. Okay, maybe. Maybe she heard it in the bathroom on Tuesday. Maybe she tried to transfer herself and twisted it, and she didn't tell me because she didn't want to worry me. She has a high pain tolerance. Thorne shook his head. No, that is physically impossible. Why? Because of the type of fracture, Thorne said. He tapped the screen again. This is a spiral fracture of the distal tibia. In forensic medicine, we call this a high-impact torsion injury. It happens when the foot is planted firmly on the ground, bearing the full weight of the body, and the leg is twisted violently. We see this in skiers who catch an edge at high speed. We see it in football players who get tackled while running. We see it in salsa dancers who spin too fast and lose their balance. He let that sink in. A paraplegic person, Thorne continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, cannot generate this kind of force. If a paralyzed person falls out of bed, they drop vertically. Gravity pulls them down. The bones break from impact, causing compression fractures, not spiral fractures. To get this injury, Maria had to be standing up. She had to be bearing her own weight, and she had to be moving with significant rotational force. The room suddenly felt very small. The air felt thin. Are you saying? I could not finish the sentence. It was too absurd. It was like saying the sky was green or that steel could float on air. I am saying, Thorne said, that the mechanics of this injury are incompatible with her diagnosis. That is insane, I stammered. I carry her to the toilet, doctor. I bathe her. I have seen her legs. They are dead weight. She cannot stand. She has been in that chair for 2 years. Thorne looked at me with something close to pity. He swiped the screen of his tablet. The image changed. This time, it was an MR. I scan a cross-section of a pair of legs. They looked like steaks, cut from a butcher shop, red circles of muscle, surrounding white circles of bone. "We ran an MRI to check for ligament damage," Thorne said. "Look at the muscle density, James." I looked. I did not need a medical degree to see what he was showing me. "When a patient is paralyzed," Thorne explained, his voice clinical, but relentless, "atrophy sets in within 6 weeks. The muscles shrink. They turn into fat and connective tissue. It is inevitable. It is biology. Use it or lose it." He pointed to the red circles. "These muscles are distinct. They are striated. They are full. There is zero fatty infiltration. There is zero atrophy. In fact, look here, the gastrocnemius muscle in the calf. It is hypertrophied, enlarged." He turned to me, his face grim. "These are not the legs of a woman who has spent 2 years in a wheelchair, James. These are the legs of an athlete. These are the legs of someone who walks, runs, and exercises every single day." I sat frozen in the chair. The world was tilting on its axis. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. I thought of the wheelchair ramp I had built with my own hands. I thought of the elevator. I thought of the nights I had massaged those legs, thinking I was soothing dead nerves, while all the while— "She can walk," I whispered. The words tasted like ash. "She can run," Thorne corrected. "She can dance. She can do anything you can do, and probably better." "But why?" The question came out as a croak. Why would she lie? Why would she sit in that chair for 2 years? Why would she let me bathe her? Why would she let me sell my company to pay for treatments she does not need? Thorne turned off the tablet. The room plunged back into semi-darkness. "I am a doctor, James, not a psychiatrist or a detective. I cannot tell you why. I can only tell you the physics. And the physics say that you are living in a lie." He walked over to me and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm grounding. "Listen to me closely," he said. "I am going to keep her here for observation for 24 hours. I will tell her it is protocol for the head injury. I will not mention the leg fracture's age. I will splint it and pretend I think it happened tonight." "Why?" I asked, looking up at him. I felt like a child lost in a forest. "Because," Thorne said, his eyes narrowing, "if she has been faking paralysis for 2 years, James, she has a reason that likely involves you. And if she finds out that you know, I do not know what she or whoever helped her is capable of." He leaned closer. "You are a structural engineer. You know that when you find a critical flaw in a building, you do not just start swinging a sledgehammer. You assess the danger. You evacuate the civilians. You secure the site." He pulled me up from the chair. "Go home, James. Go home right now. Do not confront her. Do not call her out. Go home and look at your life through the same lens you use to look at a collapsed bridge. Check the foundations. Because I have a feeling the rot goes a lot deeper than a broken ankle." He unlocked the door. "And James," he added his hand on the doorknob, "check your locks." I walked out of that room a different man than the one who had entered. The hospital corridor looked the same. The smell of antiseptic was the same. But the ground beneath my feet felt unstable. I was walking on a facade. My wife was not a victim. She was an actor. And I was not her savior. I was her mark. I drove back to the house in silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a wet, slick world that reflected the streetlights like black mirrors. When I pulled into the driveway, the house I had redesigned with my own hands loomed in the darkness. It did not look like a sanctuary anymore. It looked like a crime scene. It looked like a structure that had been condemned. I turned off the ignition, but sat in the truck for a long moment. I closed my eyes and performed a mental reset. In my line of work, emotion is a liability. If you look at a collapsed school and think about the children, you miss the structural flaw that caused the tragedy. You have to be cold. You have to be objective. You have to be a machine. I took a deep breath, compartmentalized the husband who had just wept in a hospital waiting room, and unlocked the door to the forensic engineer. I stepped out of the truck. I was not James Garcia, the loving husband, anymore. I was James Garcia, the lead investigator of a catastrophic failure. The house was silent when I entered. The air conditioner hummed with a low, steady frequency. I did not take off my coat. I walked straight to the kitchen, opened the utility drawer, and took out a pair of latex gloves and a jeweler's loupe, a small magnifying glass I used to inspect microfractures in steel bolts. I started with the vehicle. In this case, the vehicle was Maria's wheelchair. It sat in the corner of the living room where the paramedics had left it. It was a high-end model, lightweight titanium, customized for her measurements. I knelt beside it. To the untrained eye, it was just a chair. To me, it was a piece of machinery that interacted with the environment. Every contact leaves a trace. That is the first rule of forensics. I locked the brakes and lifted the left wheel. I brought the loupe to my eye and illuminated the tire tread with the flashlight from my phone. The rubber was worn. That was to be expected. But the wear pattern was wrong. If Maria was truly housebound, rolling only on hardwood floors and low-pile carpet, the wear should be smooth and uniform across the center of the tire. But here, the outer edges were shredded and pitted. There were small gouges in the rubber, consistent with rough asphalt or concrete. I spun the wheel slowly. Embedded deep in the tread pattern, I found it. A cluster of reddish-brown dust. I used a pair of tweezers to extract a sample, placing it on a white napkin. I studied it under the loupe. It was not potting soil. It was not the black dirt from our garden. It was crushed brick dust mixed with clay. My mind immediately pulled up a geological map of the local area. There was only one place within a 20-mile radius that used this specific type of red clay surfacing. The municipal tennis courts at Washington Park, 10 miles away. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. How did a woman who could barely lift herself out of bed get her wheelchair to a tennis court 10 miles away? The answer was simple. She did not. She put the chair in the trunk of a car, drove there, and then used it. But why? To maintain the ruse in public. Or maybe she did not take the chair at all. Maybe the chair picked up the dust because it was stored in the same trunk as someone's tennis gear. I moved to the bedroom. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled from the ambulance crew's arrival. I ignored the bloodstain on the floor. I walked to the nightstand where Maria kept her orthopedic shoes. They were ugly, chunky things with Velcro straps designed for comfort, not style. She claimed her feet swelled. She claimed she needed the support even when she was sitting. I picked up the left shoe. I turned it over. The sole was made of soft rubber. If a person cannot walk, the soles of their shoes should look brand new even after years. They never touch the ground with weight. They only rest on the footplates of the wheelchair. I shone the light on the toe box. The rubber was scuffed. Not just scratched, but worn down at an angle. I ran my thumb over the abrasion. This was friction wear. This happened when a person pivoted on the ball of their foot. It happened when someone stopped abruptly while moving fast. I looked at the heel. The outer edge was beveled. That comes from a heel strike gait, a walking gait. I set the shoe down. It felt heavy, like a lead weight. The physical evidence was irrefutable. Dr. Thorne was right. The building was not just cracked, the foundation was a lie. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the digital clock. It read 3 in the morning. I needed to reconstruct the timeline. Dr. Thorne had asked about last Tuesday, 72 hours ago. I closed my eyes and replayed the day. It had been raining. I had been working in the study. Maria had been in the living room. Around 7 in the evening, she had called me out. She said she had made tea, chamomile and lavender, she said, to help me relax. I remembered the taste. It was sweet, too sweet probably to mask the bitterness of the herbs. I remembered drinking it. And then, nothing. A black void. I remembered feeling incredibly heavy, my eyelids like iron shutters crashing down. I had stumbled to the guest room at 8 o'clock. I did not wake up until 10 the next morning. 14 hours of sleep. I am 62 years old. I usually sleep 6 hours a night. I had woken up with a headache and a dry mouth. I had thought I was just exhausted from the stress. Now I knew better. I was not tired. I was sedated. I stood up and walked into the master bathroom. This was Maria's domain. Since the accident, she had insisted on privacy. I rarely went in there. It was filled with her lotions, her medicines, the smell of her perfume. I opened the medicine cabinet. Nothing suspicious. Blood pressure meds, muscle relaxants, vitamins. All legitimate. But a smart engineer does not hide the flaw where the inspector looks first. You hide it in the dead space. I checked under the sink. Cleaning supplies. I checked the hamper. Dirty towels. I stood in the middle of the room thinking like her. If I needed to hide a small object quickly, where would I put it? Somewhere mundane. Somewhere invisible in plain sight. My eyes landed on the toilet paper holder. It was a simple chrome spindle. I walked over and slid the roll off. I tilted the cardboard tube. Something rattled. I shook the roll. A small foil blister pack slid out and landed in the sink. I picked it up. The label was generic, but the chemical name was clear: zolpidem tartrate, 10 milligrams. It is a powerful sedative hypnotic used to treat severe insomnia. I counted the empty bubbles. 4 were missing. 4 pills, 40 milligrams. That is enough to knock out a horse, let alone a man of my size. She had drugged me. She had waited until I was comatose, and then she had done what left had a party. I pocketed the blister pack. This was Exhibit B. Now I needed the smoking gun. I needed to see what happened on Tuesday night. I left the bedroom and walked down the hallway to my office. I sat down at my desk and woke up the main computer. I built this smart home system myself. I wrote the integration protocols. Every camera, every sensor, every lock was wired into a central server. I logged in with my administrative credentials. I navigated to the video archives. Camera 01 living room. Date Tuesday, January 17th. I clicked the file. A dialog box popped up: error. File corrupted. Data unreadable. I tried the kitchen camera. Corrupted. I tried the exterior perimeter cameras. Data missing. I sat back in my chair. My heart rate did not spike. Instead, a cold calm settled over me. This was confirmation. Files do not corrupt themselves across multiple independent channels simultaneously. Someone had manually accessed the system and executed a wipe command. Maria was tech-savvy, but she was not a coder. She knew how to use the app on her phone to delete clips. She thought that when you pressed delete, the data vanished into the ether. She underestimated me. She forgot who she was dealing with. I am a forensic engineer. I design systems with redundancy. I assume that the primary system will fail. I assume the backup will fail. So I build a failsafe for the failsafe. When I installed the server, I hardwired a physical redundancy, a black box drive, located in the basement, encased in a fireproof safe. It mirrors every byte of data from the main server in real time, but it has no network connection. You cannot wipe it remotely. You cannot wipe it from the app. You have to physically go down there and smash it with a hammer. And Maria, the paralyzed woman, could not go down to the basement. Or at least she could not risk being seen going down there, and she probably did not even know the drive existed. I had never told her. It was just standard engineering protocol. I stood up and walked to the basement door. I unlocked it and descended the wooden stairs. The air down here was cool and smelled of dry concrete. In the corner behind the furnace was my server rack. The green lights were blinking steadily in the darkness. They looked like eyes watching me. I knelt before the small black steel safe bolted to the floor. I spun the combination dial. Left to 30. Right to 18. Left to 62. The lock clicked. I swung the heavy door open. Inside sat the drive, humming softly. The red light indicated it was writing data. It was alive. I pulled the laptop I kept down there for diagnostics. I connected it to the drive via a USB-C cable. My hands were steady, but my breath was coming in short, shallow bursts. This was it. This was the moment the building falls. I opened the interface. I navigated to the folder, marked archive _01_17. The files were there. Gigabytes of them, intact, pristine. I selected the file labeled living_room_cam_2000 hours, 8 o'clock at night. I moved the cursor to the play button. I hesitated for 1 second. I knew that once I pressed this button, James Garcia, the husband, would cease to exist completely. There would be no going back. There would be no misunderstanding. There would only be the truth. I pressed play. The video loaded instantly. The image was crisp, high-definition night vision, turning the room into a grayscale landscape. I saw myself sitting on the sofa, my head lolling back. I looked dead. Then I saw the figure in the wheelchair. Maria. She was sitting perfectly still, watching me. She watched me for 5 minutes. Then she reached out and poked my arm. I did not move. She poked me harder. Nothing. Then, on the screen, the impossible happened. Maria gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. She did not struggle. She did not strain. She simply pushed herself up. She stood. She stood tall, her spine straight, her legs locking out with the strength of a person who squats heavy weights at the gym. She stretched her arms over her head, arching her back like a cat waking from a nap. She rotated her neck, cracking it. Then she turned and looked directly at the camera. She stuck her tongue out and winked. I stopped breathing. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. It was one thing to hear the doctor say it. It was another thing entirely to see it. But the video was not over. She strutted out of the frame toward the bedroom. A few minutes later, she returned. She was no longer wearing her nightgown. She was wearing a tight red dress that I had never seen before. She was wearing 4-inch stilettos. She walked to the front door and unlocked it. A moment later, headlights swept across the living room window. The front door opened. A man walked in. He was shaking a wet umbrella. He was tall, wearing a trench coat. He turned to face Maria, and the camera caught his profile perfectly. It was Marcus, my partner, my protege, the man I treated like a son. He dropped the umbrella on the floor and opened his arms. Maria ran to him, actually ran, and jumped into his embrace, wrapping her legs around his waist. He spun her around, laughing. I watched, frozen in the basement of my own home, as the two people I loved most in the world kissed with a passion that made my stomach churn. "Is he out?" Marcus asked. The audio was crystal clear. "Out cold," Maria replied, her voice sharp and mocking. "The old fool drank every drop. He will not wake up until tomorrow." "Good," Marcus said, setting her down, "because we have a timeline to keep." "Did he sign the papers yet?" "Not yet," she said, smoothing her dress. "He is stalling. But do not worry. I will guilt-trip him tomorrow. He is so pathetic when he thinks I am in pain." "He is a useful idiot," Marcus said, grinning. "Come on, let's go celebrate. I booked the VIP table." "Let's go," Maria said. They walked arm in arm out the door, leaving my unconscious body on the couch like a piece of discarded furniture. I stared at the frozen final frame of the video. The image of Marcus's hand resting possessively on my wife's lower back burned into my retinas. I did not scream. I did not smash the computer. I felt a strange, cold clarity settling over me, like the silence after a demolition charge goes off. The structure was gone. The rubble was all that was left. But I was an engineer. I knew how to clear rubble, and I knew how to build a trap. I reached for the mouse and clicked Save Copy. The game was on. The glow of the monitor was the only light in the basement, casting long, distorted shadows against the concrete walls. I sat there, a spectator, to my own humiliation, watching the digital timestamp in the corner of the screen tick forward. Tuesday, 8:30 in the evening. On the screen, The living room was bathed in the warm, artificial light of the lamps I had bought for Maria, because she said the spectrum helped her migraines. I saw myself sitting at the dining table. My head was heavy. I watched as my on-screen avatar swayed slightly, fighting the heavy blanket of the zolpidem she had slipped into my tea. I looked like a drunkard. I looked pathetic. Finally, my head dropped onto my arms, cushioned by the placemat. I was out. For a full minute, nothing moved. The room was still. Then the woman in the wheelchair stirred. Maria did not just stand up. She unfolded. It was terrifying to watch. For 2 years, I had seen her body as a broken vessel, something fragile that needed to be lifted, carried, and turned. But on the screen, she placed her hands on the armrests and pushed herself vertical with a terrifying grace. There was no hesitation. There was no tremble of weak muscles. She stood to her full height, 5 feet and 7 inches, and she stretched. She threw her arms back, arching her spine, and rolled her neck. I could almost hear the satisfaction in that stretch, the release of a predator that had been playing dead for too long. She looked down at my unconscious body and shook her head. Then she walked. She did not shuffle. She sashayed. She walked with a rhythm and a confidence that made my stomach churn. She walked out of the frame toward the master bedroom. I sat in the basement, my hand gripping the mouse so hard the plastic creaked. I wanted to look away, but I could not. I had to see the extent of the rot. 10 minutes later, on the timestamp, she returned. The transformation was complete. The modest nightgown was gone. She was wearing a red dress that hugged every curve of her body, a dress I had never seen before. It was cut low and dangerous. On her feet were 4-inch stiletto heels. She walked over to the hallway mirror, the one I had lowered 6 inches, so she could see herself from the wheelchair, and checked her makeup. She applied a fresh coat of lipstick red as a warning sign. She smirked at her reflection. It was a smile I did not recognize. It was cold, predatory, and full of contempt. Then the headlights swept across the window. The front door opened. Marcus walked in. Seeing him in the flesh on the screen shaking off his umbrella hit me harder than the concept of him had a moment ago. This was the man who had sat at my bedside when I had the flu. This was the man who had toasted me at company dinners. He looked at Maria, and his eyes went wide. He whistled. "Damn," he said. The audio from the high-fidelity microphones I had installed picked up every syllable. "You look incredible." "I feel incredible," Maria replied. Her voice was strong, devoid of the breathy weakness she used when speaking to me. "I have been stuck in that chair for 3 days straight. My legs are restless." She walked over to him. The click-clack of her heels on the hardwood floor was a sound I had not heard in this house for years. She threw her arms around his neck, and he lifted her off the ground, spinning her around. They kissed. It was not a tentative kiss. It was hungry. It was the kiss of 2 people who had been doing this for a long time. They pulled apart, breathless. Marcus looked over her shoulder at me, slumped over the dining table. "He is out cold," Marcus said, laughing. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. "Did you check his pulse? Make sure you did not kill the golden goose too early." Maria glanced back at me with a look of pure disgust. "He is fine. I gave him 20 milligrams. He will sleep until noon. We have plenty of time." She walked over to where I was sleeping and picked up my wallet from the table. She pulled out a stack of cash, my emergency fund, and tucked it into Marcus's jacket pocket. "For the drinks," she said. "So," Marcus said, leaning against the doorframe, looking at me like I was a piece of trash on the curb. "How is the timeline looking? Is he going to sign the authorization?" "He is breaking," Maria said, adjusting her earring. "He feels guilty. I played the crying victim card perfectly this morning. I told him I dreamed of walking on the beach in Zurich. He was practically in tears. He will sign the full power of attorney and the stock transfer by Friday." "Good," Marcus said, "because the buyers for the Florida property are getting impatient. They want to close next week." My blood ran cold. The Florida property. It was a commercial lot I had owned for 20 years, intended to be my retirement nest egg. It was worth $2 million. I had never authorized a sale. $2 million for the land, Marcus continued, doing the math in the air. $3 million from the stock liquidation. That puts us at $5 million liquid. $5 million, Maria repeated, savoring the words. And then, Marcus smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. And then we fly you to Switzerland for the treatment. Sadly, the treatment fails. James gets depressed. The stress is too much for his heart. We switch his beta blockers for something a little more reactive. A grieving widower having a heart attack. No one will ask questions. And then we are free, Maria whispered. And rich, Marcus added. I stopped the video. I had to. I felt like I was going to vomit. I leaned over the trash can next to the server rack and dry-heaved my body, rejecting the reality I had just ingested. They were not just stealing from me. They were planning to kill me. They had a timeline. My life was measured in days. The caregiver burnout they talked about so sympathetically was part of the narrative they were building. Poor James. He worked himself to death trying to save his wife. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. The shock was beginning to fade, replaced by a cold, hard rage. Hard. It started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. It was not the hot, explosive anger of a man in a bar fight. It was the calculated, icy resolve of an engineer staring at a structural flaw that threatened to bring down a city. I forced myself to hit play again. I needed to see the rest. Let's go, Maria said on the screen. I need to dance. I need to move. Where to? Marcus asked. The usual spot. The underground club on State Street, she said. The salsa night. I need to burn off this energy. They left the house, leaving the door unlocked. I sat back. Salsa night. The doctor's words echoed in my mind. High-impact twist. Salsa dancers who spin too fast. That was it. She had gone dancing. She had been spinning drunk on my money and her own deception, and she had slipped. A twist, a snap, a fracture. And then the scramble to cover it up. They must have panicked. They probably drove back, put her in the bed, and waited for the swelling to start before she staged the fall in the bedroom. But I was not done. The engineer in me needed more data. 1 data point is an anomaly. 3 is a trend. I closed the Tuesday file and opened the archive folder. I started clicking through random dates over the last month. January 10th. Tuesday. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was at the grocery store. I remembered that trip. I had spent an hour looking for a specific brand of organic kale Maria claimed was the only thing she could digest. On the screen, the moment my truck left the driveway, Maria rolled her wheelchair to the study. She stood up. She walked to the wall, safe hidden behind the painting of the bridge I had designed. She punched in the code. My code. She must have watched me enter it a dozen times, playing the part of the sleeping invalid in the corner. She opened the safe. She did not take money this time. She took out documents. My life insurance policy, the deed to the house, the patent filings for my structural damping system. She laid them out on the desk and used her phone to photograph every page. She was thorough. She was documenting my net worth down to the last cent. January 5th, Thursday, 10 in the morning. I was at the pharmacy picking up her prescriptions. On the screen, Maria was in the living room. She was not in the wheelchair. She was on a yoga mat she had pulled from under the sofa. She was doing burpees, push-ups, squats. She was training. She was keeping her body in peak physical condition while I blended her food because she claimed she was too weak to chew. I watched her do a perfect handstand against the wall. The mockery of it cut deep. Every time I had lifted her into the bath, straining my back, sweating with the effort, she had been dead weight on purpose. She had made herself heavy. She had made me suffer. Why? The answer was in the video from Tuesday. Because she could. Because I was the useful idiot. Because watching me serve her fed some sick, twisted power fantasy. It was not just about the money. It was about the dominance. It was about taking a man who built skyscrapers and turning him into a servant. I closed the laptop. The silence in the basement was deafening. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling not from fear, but from the sheer force of the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I made a fist, squeezing, until my fingernails dug into my palm. I felt the skin break. I felt the wet warmth of blood. I stared at the drop of blood welling in the center of my hand. It was dark red, almost black in the dim light. I did not cry. James Garcia, the husband, might have wept. But James Garcia, the senior forensic engineer, did not have time for tears. When a building is compromised, you do not mourn the architecture. You assess the damage. You calculate the load. You determine the safest method of controlled demolition. They wanted a timeline. I would give them a timeline. They wanted $5 million. I would give them a bill they could never pay. They wanted a heart attack. Well, the stress on a structure increases exponentially before the collapse. I took a deep breath, the smell of dust and concrete filling my lungs. It was the smell of a job site. It was the smell of work to be done. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had not called in years, a private investigator I had used for corporate espionage cases, back when the firm was expanding. "It is 3 a.m, the voice on the other end grumbled. "I have a job," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, metallic, devoid of any softness. "I need a forensic accountant and I need a surveillance team, tonight." "James," the voice woke up. "What is going on?" "A demolition," I said. "I am bringing the house down." In structural engineering, we distinguish between two types of forces that act upon a building. There are dead loads, which are the permanent, immovable weights of the structure itself, the beams, the walls, the concrete slabs. And then there are live loads. These are the temporary shifting weights, the people, the furniture, the wind, the snow. A good engineer calculates for both. A bad engineer forgets that live loads can change in an instant, shifting the center of gravity and bringing the whole edifice crashing down. For 30 years, I thought Maria was my dead load, my constant, my anchor. Now, I knew she was a live load, a volatile force shifting beneath my feet, waiting to snap the girders. I drove to St. Jude's Hospital at 10 a.m. I parked my truck, checked my face in the rearview mirror, and adjusted my mask. The mask was not made of plastic. It was made of grief and exhaustion. I slumped my shoulders. I let my mouth hang slightly open. I relaxed my facial muscles to mimic the look of a beaten man. When I walked into her room, Maria was sitting up in bed, her left leg encased in a temporary splint. Dr. Thorne had played his part perfectly. He had told her the ankle sprain was severe, but consistent with a fall from bed. He had given her pain meds. He had fed the narrative. "James," she whimpered when she saw me. She reached out a hand. I rushed to her side, taking her hand in mine. It felt cold. I wanted to crush it. I wanted to squeeze until I felt the bones grind together. Instead, I brought it to my lips and kissed it gently. "I am so sorry, baby," I said, my voice thick with fake emotion. "I should have been there. I should never have slept in the guest room." "It is not your fault," she said, squeezing my hand. I felt so useless. I tried to stand James. I really tried. But my legs, they just gave out." I watched her eyes. They were wide wet with tears. If I did not have the video of her doing squats in my living room burned into my retinas, I would have believed her. She was a virtuoso performer. "We are not waiting anymore," I said firmly. "I am going to the office straight from here. I am signing the papers with Marcus today. We will have the money by the end of the week. I am booking the flight to Zurich. We are getting you those stem cells." I watched closely. For a fraction of a second, the pain in her face vanished. Her pupils dilated. The corner of her mouth twitched upward. It was a micro-expression of pure greed. It was the look of a gambler who just saw the dealer bust. "Really?" she breathed. "You would do that, but your company." It is your life's work. You are my life, I lied. The rest is just concrete and steel. Oh, James, she sighed, pulling me into a hug. Over her shoulder, her face went blank, cold, and calculating. I held my breath, revulsion rising in my throat like bile. I took her home, settled her into the wheelchair, the vehicle of her deception, and told her I had to go meet Marcus. Go, she said, patting my arm. Do it for us. I drove to the office of Garcia and Partners. The building was a sleek glass structure I had designed 15 years ago. It used to fill me with pride. Now, it felt like enemy territory. Marcus was in my office. He was sitting behind my desk, his feet propped up on the mahogany surface. When I walked in, he scrambled up, buttoning his jacket, smoothing his tie. "James," he exclaimed, coming around the desk with a wide, predatory smile. "I did not expect you until this afternoon. How is Maria?" "She is resting," I said, dropping into one of the client chairs. I made a show of rubbing my temples. "It has been a hell of a night, Marcus. I am tired. I just want this over with." "I understand completely," Marcus said, his voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. He moved back to the desk and picked up a thick leather binder. "I have everything prepared. The board has approved the buyout. The transfer documents are ready for your signature." He slid the binder across the desk. Beside it, he placed a gold fountain pen, the one I had given him when he made partner. "Just sign on the tabs, James, and the wire transfer for $3 million will be initiated within 48 hours. The sale of the Florida land will follow next week." I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes hungry. I left my reading glasses at the hospital," I said, squinting at the page. "My eyes are getting worse every day, Marcus. The stress is killing my vision." "That is okay," Marcus said quickly. "It is just standard boilerplate, legal jargon. You know how lawyers are." "I do," I said. "But my father always told me never sign what you cannot read. Do me a favor, son. Read the terms of the stock transfer to me, just the section on voting rights and class structure." Marcus hesitated. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "James, really it is—" "Please," I interrupted, my voice sounding frail and pathetic. "Humor an old man. I need to hear it." Marcus sighed, annoyed, but trying to hide it. He flipped to page 12. He started reading, speeding through the text. Subsection 4, paragraph B. The seller agrees to transfer all Class A common stock to the purchasing entity. He was mumbling. "Slow down, Marcus," I said. "Read clearly." He cleared his throat. "The seller agrees to transfer all Class A common stock to the purchasing entity. In exchange, the seller will retain an honorary position as chairman emeritus and will be issued Class B preferred stock." He tried to skip the next line. "Keep reading," I commanded softly. "Class B preferred stock which holds 0 voting rights and is non-convertible and non-transferable until the death of the holder." I sat back. There it was. The trap. If I signed this, I was not selling the company. I was handing it over for worthless paper. Class B stock with 0 voting rights meant I would have no say in the company. And non-transferable until death meant I could not cash it out. The $3 million was not a lump sum payment. It was likely tied to dividends that Marcus could cancel at any time. They were not buying me out. They were locking me out. I lowered the pen. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, his smile tightening. "No," I said. "No problem. But there is a tax issue." "A tax issue?" "Yes," I lied. "I was reviewing the portfolio of the structural damping patents last night. If I transfer the stock now, before the fiscal quarter ends, the capital gains tax will hit me at 35%. I will lose nearly $1 million to the IRS. I saw the panic flash in Marcus's eyes. He did not care about my taxes, but he cared about the money being delayed. "James, the deal is on the table now. The board might change their minds if we wait." "I just need 3 days," I said, standing up shakily. I need to get my accountant to reevaluate the patent holding structure. If we structure it as a trust transfer instead of a direct sale, I save the million. That is $1 million more for Maria's treatment." I looked at him. I used his own greed against him. "You want Maria to have the best, don't you, Marcus?" He was cornered. If he pushed too hard, he looked suspicious. If he agreed, he delayed their timeline. "Of course," he said through gritted teeth. 3 days. But James no longer. The buyers are waiting. 3 days, I promised. I will come back on Friday with the new valuation. I walked out of the office. My back was straight until I hit the elevator. Then I slumped again just in case there were cameras. But inside I was vibrating with energy. I had bought myself 72 hours. My next stop was not home. I drove to a nondescript strip mall on the outskirts of the city. No sign on the door, just a number. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. Frankie, the Hawk Miller, was an ex-Treasury agent who had been fired for being too good at digging into places the government did not want dug. He was the best forensic accountant in the state. I sat down and placed a hard drive on his desk, a copy of the black box data. "What is this?" Frankie asked. He was a small man with ink-stained fingers. "Evidence," I said. "Attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, corporate theft." "Who is the target?" "My wife," I said flatly. "And my business partner." Frankie whistled low. "Family style. Those are the messy ones." "I need you to trace the money," I said. "I want to know where Marcus is moving the company funds. I want to know about the offshore accounts. I want to know who is buying the Florida land. And I hired a PI to tail them. But I need you to link the finances." "I charge $200 an hour," Frankie said. I pulled out a thick envelope of cash, $5,000 I had withdrawn from an ATM across town. "Start now. I need a preliminary report in 48 hours. "You got it." I drove home as the sun was setting. The house looked welcoming, warm yellow light spilling from the windows. It was a lie. It was a stage set. I entered through the garage. I walked into the kitchen. Maria was in her wheelchair by the island, chopping vegetables. "James," she chirped. I made dinner. Well, I tried. Sitting down makes it hard to reach the stove. "You shouldn't strain yourself," I chided gently. "Let me finish." She watched me cook. She watched me like a hawk. "Did you sign the papers?" she asked casually. "Almost," I said, stirring the sauce. "Just a minor delay with the tax forms. Friday is the day." Her jaw tightened. I saw it. Just a flicker. "Friday," she repeated. That is good." Later that evening came the tea ritual. Every night at 8, Maria made me her special herbal blend. "Here you go, darling," she said, handing me the steaming mug. "Drink up. You look so tired." I took the mug. The smell of chamomile was overpowering, masking the bitter chemical scent of the sedative. "Thank you," I said. I walked to the living room. I sat in my usual chair. Maria went to the bathroom to wash up. The moment the door clicked shut, I moved. I poured the tea into the large potted fern beside my chair. I refilled the mug with lukewarm water from the bottle I had hidden in my jacket pocket earlier. I sat back down. When she came out, the mug was empty. "All gone?" she asked, smiling. "Delicious," I said, faking a yawn. I think it is hitting me already." I slumped in the chair. I let my eyes droop. I let my breathing become heavy and rhythmic. I waited. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. "James," she whispered. I did not move. She clapped her hands loudly, right next to my ear. I kept my breathing steady. It takes incredible discipline not to flinch when someone claps by your ear, but I had been practicing meditation for years to manage stress. I went to a place of absolute stillness. "He is out," she said. I heard the sound of a zipper. Then, the sound of her standing up. Her joints popped. She walked around the room pacing. She pulled out her phone. "Marcus, she hissed into the receiver. "We have a problem." Pause. "He delayed it. He said Friday. Tax issues." Pause. "I know," she snapped. "I know we don't have time. The flight is booked for Sunday. If the money isn't in the account by Saturday, we lose the reservations." She walked closer to where I was sleeping. I could smell her perfume. It was suffocating. "He is getting suspicious, Marcus," she said, her voice dropping to a sinister whisper. "He asked too many questions about the contract today. And tonight, he looked at me differently." Pause. "No," she said. "We cannot wait for the heart attack naturally. We have to accelerate the timeline." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my body to remain limp. "The beta blockers," she said. "I will swap them tomorrow. I have the digoxin. If I give him a triple dose mixed with his morning coffee, yes, it will look like cardiac arrest. He is old. He is stressed. No one will perform an autopsy on a 62-year-old man with a history of hypertension." She laughed. It was a soft, cruel sound. "Friday night," she said. "After he signs the papers, we celebrate his retirement and then he goes to sleep forever." She hung up. She leaned down and kissed me on the forehead. "Good night, James," she whispered. "Sleep well. You only have 2 more nights left." She walked away, her heels clicking on the floor. I lay there in the dark, listening to the woman I had loved for 30 years plan my execution. I felt the cold sweat on my skin. They were going to kill me in 48 hours. But they had made one critical calculation error. They assumed I was a static load. They assumed I would just sit there and take the weight until I collapsed. They were wrong. I was about to become the most dangerous force in nature, a live load in motion. And I was going to bring the whole house down on top of them. The first rule of stabilizing a compromised structure is to divert the load path. You cannot repair a foundation while it is still carrying the weight of the skyscraper. You have to shore it up, transfer the stress to temporary supports, and ensure that when the critical failure happens, the collapse is controlled. I had 48 hours before my wife planned to stop my heart, so I had to move faster than I had ever moved in my life. Wednesday morning began with a phone call made from a burner phone I bought at a gas station. I sat in my truck 2 blocks away from the house, watching the digital readout on the dashboard clock. It was 8 in the morning. Maria was still asleep, or pretending to be likely dreaming of spending my money on the beaches of Rio. I dialed a number I had not called in 3 years. "Hello," the voice was wary. It was my sister Elena. "It is me," I said. There was a long silence on the other end. Maria had successfully driven a wedge between us years ago, claiming Elena was jealous of our success, jealous of our happiness. I had believed her. I had let my sister drift away, because it was easier than fighting the daily battles Maria picked. "James," Elena said, her voice softening. "Is everything okay? Is it Maria?" "Maria is fine," I said, my voice steady. "But I am not. I need your help, Elle. And I need you to trust me without asking questions for exactly 3 days." "You know I am here," she said immediately. That is the thing about blood. Real blood, not the fake bond Maria and I shared. It does not break under pressure. "I am transferring my liquid assets," I told her. "Everything that is not tied down by the company bylaws. The savings, the bonds, the emergency accounts. I am moving them into an irrevocable trust under your name. I am emailing you the routing numbers now." "James, that is millions of dollars. What is going on?" "I am protecting the estate," I said. "If anything happens to me, or if anyone tries to claim power of attorney over me, that money is legally yours. You are the trustee. No one else can touch it. Not Maria. Not Marcus. Nobody." "You are scaring me," she whispered. "I will explain everything on Saturday," I promised. "Just sign the digital forms I send you. And Elle, I love you." I hung up before I cracked. I transferred 4 $0.2 million, the entirety of my personal liquidity, out of the joint accounts I shared with Maria, and into the secure trust. It took 10 minutes on my phone. When the transfer complete notification popped up, I felt the first beam of support slide into place. If they killed me now, they would inherit an empty vault. My next stop was the office of Robert Sterling, my estate attorney. He was an old friend, a man who still wore three-piece suits and used a typewriter for his first drafts. He looked at me over his reading glasses when I stormed into his office without an appointment. "James," he said, surprised. "I thought you were busy with the buyout." "I have a change to make to my will," I said, sitting down, "and it needs to be executed today, immediately." "We can draft a codicil," Robert said slowly. "What is the change?" "I am removing Maria as the primary beneficiary," I said. Robert dropped his pen. "James, she is your wife. Under state law, you cannot just—" "I am not disinheriting her completely," I lied, though I wished I could. "I am adding a contingency clause. In the event of my death being ruled suspicious, accidental or sudden due to cardiac arrest, prior to the age of 7,100% of my estate, including all real estate intellectual property and remaining assets, bypasses her and goes directly to the Chicago Stray Animal Rescue League." Robert stared at me. "The dog shelter. And the cats," I added. "If I die of natural causes after age 70, she gets the standard spousal share. But if I die this week, Robert, she gets nothing. Not a dime. Not a brick of the house." Robert was a smart man. He looked at my face, saw the dark circles under my eyes, and realized this was not a whim. It was a shield. "I will draft it," he said. "We will sign it before noon." "Good," I said. "And I want a copy sent to the executor of the state, sealed to be opened only by the coroner." Step 2 was complete. The poison pill was in place. By noon, I was back at the hospital, but not to see Maria. I met Dr. Thorne in the cafeteria. He looked tired. He handed me a thick manila envelope. "This is everything," Thorne said, keeping his voice low. "I had the radiologist certify the scans. I wrote a sworn affidavit detailing the callus formation on her tibia. I also included the muscle density analysis. In a court of law, this proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the patient has been fully ambulatory for at least 18 months. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, like a weapon. "Thank you, doctor." "Be careful, James," Thorne said, touching my arm. "I saw her this morning when she came in for a checkup on the splint. She asked me about autopsy procedures. She tried to make it sound like casual curiosity, asking if older people always get autopsies if they die at home." My blood ran cold. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that unless there is foul play, suspected natural deaths are often signed off by the attending physician without an invasive exam," Thorne said. She seemed relieved. "She won't be relieved for long," I said grimly. I spent the afternoon playing the role of the technician. I went to a spy shop on the north side of the city and bought 4 high-definition pinhole cameras. They were the size of a button with battery packs that lasted 48 hours and local SD card storage. Wireless signals could be jammed or detected, hard storage could not. I returned home while Maria was napping. I moved through the house like a ghost. I installed one camera in the kitchen, hidden inside the smoke detector, directly above the island where she prepared my food. I put another in the living room, concealed in the spine of a book on the shelf facing my armchair. The third went into the master bedroom inside the air vent. The 4th camera I kept in my pocket. I had a special use for that one. That evening, the performance resumed. I came home looking haggard. Maria was in her wheelchair, smiling that sweet, venomous smile. "Did you get the tax issues sorted?" she asked, handing me a glass of water. "Almost," I said. "I have a meeting with the IRS agent tomorrow morning, but I have good news. The funds will be cleared for transfer by Friday night." "Friday night," she repeated. Her eyes lit up. "That is perfect. We can celebrate." "Yes," I said. "In fact, I was thinking, Friday is our 30th anniversary. I want to throw a party. She hesitated. A party, James. I am not feeling up to a crowd. Just a small gathering, I insisted. Here at the house. Marcus, a few of the old partners, maybe some friends from the neighborhood. I want to make the announcement of my retirement and the sale of the company in front of everyone. I want to toast to our future in Switzerland, she calculated. A party meant witnesses to my happiness before my sudden tragic death. It would be the perfect alibi. Everyone would see a loving husband and a devoted wife. Then, later that night, the grieving widow would call 911. Okay, she said, squeezing my hand. That sounds lovely. A celebration. I will call Marcus, I said. Wednesday night brought the closest call of my life. I was lying in the guest bed, breathing in the shallow rhythmic pattern I used to feign deep sleep. I had not taken the pills she gave me. I had palmed them and flushed them down the toilet. But I had to act the part of the sedated man. My door creaked open. I did not move. I did not twitch. I kept my mouth slightly open, letting a soft snoring sound escape my throat. I heard the rubber wheels of the chair roll onto the carpet. Then silence. She was standing up. I felt the mattress dip as she sat on the edge of the bed right beside me. I could smell her lotion. It was lavender, the same scent she used to wear on our dates. Now it smelled like formaldehyde. She leaned over me. I felt her breath on my face. She was checking to see if I was truly out. I forced my eyes to remain rolled back behind my lids, my body limp. Her hand slid under my pillow. She was looking for my wallet. She found it. I heard the soft rustle of leather. She was checking my credit cards, maybe looking for the receipt from the spy shop. Panic flared in my chest. I had paid cash, but had I left the receipt in there? My heart rate began to climb. Thump, thump, thump. If she put her hand on my chest, she would feel it. She would know. I used every ounce of mental discipline I possessed. I visualized a calm lake. I visualized a steel beam holding a static load. Slow down, I commanded my heart. Slow down. She pulled something out of the wallet. I heard a piece of paper unfold. Stupid old man, she whispered. Keeping a fortune in your pocket. She was talking about the cash I kept for emergencies. She took a few bills, petty theft compared to the millions she planned to steal, and stuffed the wallet back under my pillow. She stood up. She lingered for a moment, her hand hovering over my face. For a second, I thought she might smother me right there with the pillow. I tensed my abdominal muscles, ready to strike, ready to snap her wrist if she tried. But she just laughed softly and walked away. 2 more days, she whispered. When the door closed, I let out a breath that shook my entire body. I was living with a viper in my bedsheets. Thursday morning, I reinforced the final corner of the foundation. I drove to a diner near the federal building. Sitting in the back booth was Agent Jack Miller. We had gone to college together before he joined the bureau, and I started the firm. We had stayed in touch over the years, mostly for golf, but today was strictly business. You look like hell, James, Miller said, sliding a coffee across the table. I feel like it, I said. Did you run the name? Miller nodded. He pulled a folder from his briefcase but kept his hand on it. I did. James, you need to understand that what I am about to tell you is classified active investigation material. If you repeat this, I will deny we ever met. Understood. Miller opened the folder. Marcus Vane, your partner. We have had him on our radar for 6 months. He is not just a greedy executive. He is a launderer. For who? The cartel, Miller said. He moves money through shell real estate companies. He buys distressed properties, inflates their value, and sells them to offshore entities controlled by the cartel to clean their cash. We have been building a RICO case, but we needed a direct link to the illicit funds. He is buying my land in Florida, I said. That is the link. Miller's eyes widened. Is the sale complete? No, I said. It closes Friday night, along with the sale of my company stock. I leaned forward. Jack, He is not just laundering money. He is conspiring to murder me. Miller stiffened. What? He and my wife, I said. They have a plan. They are going to overdose me with heart medication on Friday night after I sign the papers. They want the company, the land, and the life insurance. Then they are fleeing to Brazil. I slid the flash drive containing the basement video and Dr. Thorne's report across the table. This is the evidence, I said. Video of them conspiring. Medical proof she is faking paralysis. And I have cameras in my house right now recording her preparing the poison. Miller took the drive. His face was hard professional. James, we need to bring them in, now. We can arrest Marcus for the laundering and get her for conspiracy. No, I said. Not yet. James, this is dangerous. If they are planning a hit. I need them to commit, I interrupted. I need Marcus to sign the transfer papers that link him to the cartel funds. I need Maria to hand me the poison glass. I need the crime to be undeniable. I want them to think they have won. You want to spring a trap, Miller said. I am an engineer, Jack, I said. I do not just want to patch the crack. I want to bring the whole corrupt structure down. I am throwing a party Friday night, the 30th anniversary. I want you and your team there, outside, waiting for my signal. Miller looked at me for a long time. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He saw that I was not asking for permission. I was offering him a career-making bust on a silver platter. Friday night, Miller said. We will have a tactical team in the van down the street. We will wire you up. No wire, I said. I have my own cameras. Just be ready to breach when I give the signal. What is the signal? When the structure fails, I said enigmatically. You will know. I drove home with the final piece of the puzzle in place. The foundation was reinforced. The load paths were calculated. The charges were set. I walked into the house and found Maria in the kitchen. She was grinding pills with a mortar and pestle. When I entered, she quickly swept the powder into a small jar and hid it behind the flour canister. Making something special, I asked, my voice cheerful. Just some spices for the party, she smiled. I want everything to be perfect for Friday. It will be, I said, looking at the smoke detector, where my hidden camera was blinking invisibly, recording every second of her treachery. It will be a night no one ever forgets. I went to my study and opened the safe. I took out the deed to the Florida land and the stock certificates. I placed them on the desk. They were the bait. $5 million of bait. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Friday was circled in red. The timeline was set. The doctor said the timeline did not add up, but he was wrong. The timeline was perfect. It was counting down to 0. And when the clock struck, I would be the only one left standing in the rubble. In engineering terms, the yield point is the specific stress level at which a material begins to deform plastically. Before this point, if you remove the load, the material returns to its original shape. It is elastic. It is forgiving. But once you cross the yield point, there is no going back. The damage is permanent. The structure is altered forever. Friday night was the yield point of my life. My house, usually a quiet mausoleum of illness and whispered conversations, had been transformed into a carnival of false cheer. The living room was filled with fresh flowers, lilies and orchids that smelled too sweet, like a funeral parlor disguised as a garden. A string quartet played soft, inoffensive Mozart in the corner. Waiters in black vests moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I stood at the top of the stairs for a moment, looking down at the structural load I had invited into my home. There were 50 people down there, friends I had not seen in years, business partners from the firm, neighbors who had watched my lawn turn brown while I cared for my wife. And in the center of it all, holding court like a queen on a throne of titanium and rubber, was Maria. She was wearing a pale blue silk dress that draped over her wasted legs, hiding the muscles I knew were tense and ready. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, revealing the diamond earrings I had bought her for our 25th anniversary. She looked frail. She looked beautiful. She looked like a saint, suffering in silence. I adjusted my tie in the mirror. My hands were steady. I checked the small remote control in my pocket. It was not the remote for the television. It was a custom trigger I had programmed to override the house's entertainment system. I walked down the stairs. "James!" The cry came from Mrs. Higgins, our next-door neighbor. She rushed over, clutching a glass of white wine. "Oh, James, look at you. You look so handsome, but so tired. You are a saint, you know that, a living saint." "I do what I have to do, Martha," I said, giving her a tight smile. "Most men would have put her in a home years ago," a man said, clapping me on the back. It was Tom, an old college buddy. "But not you. You sacrificed everything. The company, your retirement. That is true love, pal." I nodded, accepting their praises. Each compliment felt like a slap in the face. They saw a hero. I saw a fool. But tonight, the fool was going to burn the circus down. I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting condolences for a death that had not happened yet. I saw Marcus near the fireplace. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my first car. He was laughing, holding a scotch, looking every inch the successful successor. When he saw me, his eyes sharpened. He checked his watch. The timeline. He was worried about the timeline. "James," Marcus said, sliding through the crowd to meet me. He grabbed my elbow, his grip tight. "Glad you finally came down. The notary is here. She is in the study. We should get the signatures out of the way before the speeches. You know, so you can relax." "Not yet," I said, pulling my arm away gently. "I want to do it in front of everyone. I want them to witness my commitment to Maria. It makes the moment more special, don't you think?" Marcus hesitated. He did not like deviations, but he could not argue with a man who was about to hand him a $5 million fortune. "All right," he said, forcing a smile. "But let us not drag it out. Maria is tired." "She looks full of energy to me," I said dryly. I walked over to Maria. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and innocent. "Happy anniversary, darling," she whispered, taking my hand. Her palm was sweating. 30 years, I said. "It feels like a lifetime, doesn't it?" "It has been wonderful," she lied. "We should start," I said. "I want to give a speech." I signaled to the string quartet to stop playing. I walked to the center of the room, near the large 80-inch screen we used for movie nights. Marcus stood to my right, holding the leather binder containing the transfer papers. Maria was to my left, the picture of tragic grace. Someone tapped a glass with a spoon. The room went silent. 50 faces turned toward me. They expected a tearful tribute. They expected a resignation speech. "Thank you all for coming," I began. My voice was calm, projecting easily to the back of the room. 30 years ago, I stood at an altar and promised to love this woman in sickness and in health. I promised to protect her. I promised to be her foundation. "Aw," the crowd murmured collectively. "I am a structural engineer," I continued. "My job is to understand the forces that hold things together. Tension, compression, shear. We build structures to withstand the wind and the rain. But sometimes the most dangerous force is not the storm outside. It is the rot inside." The room went quiet. The metaphor was a little heavy, a little dark for a party. I saw Marcus shift his weight. He looked at Maria. Maria looked confused. "I have learned a lot about forces recently," I said. "I have learned that trust is like concrete. It is strong in compression but weak in tension. If you pull it too hard, it cracks. And once it cracks, you cannot just paint over it. You have to tear it down." I looked at Marcus. "Marcus here has brought some papers for me to sign. He tells me it is a trust fund for Maria, a way to secure her future after I sell the company." "That is right, James," Marcus said loudly, trying to steer the ship back on course. "It is for Maria's care. Why don't we sign them now?" "In a moment," I said, raising a hand. "First, I want to tell you all a story. A short story about last Tuesday." Maria froze. I saw her hand grip the armrest of her wheelchair. Her knuckles turned white. She knew Tuesday. Tuesday was the day the timeline broke. Last Tuesday. I said I was feeling very tired. Maria made me a cup of tea. It was delicious. I fell asleep early. While I was sleeping, something miraculous happened. I looked out at the audience. They were captivated, thinking I was about to recount a spiritual experience. I woke up the next morning and the world seemed the same, I said. But then I met a doctor, a very smart man named Dr. Thorne, and he asked me a question that I want to ask all of you tonight. I paused. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. He asked me, how does a woman who has been paralyzed for 2 years, whose muscles should be atrophied and weak, manage to get a spiral fracture in her ankle that is only consistent with high-impact pivoting like dancing the salsa? The room did not react instantly. The sentence was complex. People were trying to parse the medical jargon. But Maria reacted. Her face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus stepped forward. James, you are rambling. You have had too much wine. Let's go to the study. I am stone-cold sober, Marcus, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming the steel voice I used on construction sites. And I have another question. This one is for you. I turned to face him. How does a man who calls himself my son, a man I raised in this business, look me in the eye and shake my hand while he is sleeping with my wife? Gasps erupted in the room. A glass shattered on the floor. The polite veneer of the party disintegrated instantly. James, Marcus shouted, his face turning red. That is enough. You are drunk. You are delusional with grief. Someone call a doctor. What are you saying? Maria cried out, tears instantly springing to her eyes. James, how could you? I am a cripple. I can't even walk to the bathroom. How can you accuse me of such things in front of our friends? She was good. Even now, cornered, she played the victim. The crowd looked back and forth, unsure who to believe, the drunk husband or the weeping paraplegic. He is having a breakdown, Marcus announced to the room. Please, everyone, give us some space. We need to get him to bed. He reached for me. He was going to try to physically remove me. Do not touch me, I said. I did not shout. I did not have to. The authority in my voice stopped him cold. You say you are a cripple, Maria, I asked softly. You say I am delusional. Look at me, she sobbed, gesturing to her legs. Look at my legs. I would give anything to dance. Anything. Well, I said, pulling the remote from my pocket. Be careful what you wish for. I pointed the remote at the screen behind me and pressed the red button. The screen flickered to life. The audio system, which was connected to the whole house speakers, crackled. The video from Tuesday night appeared. It was massive, 80 inches of high-definition betrayal. The image showed the living room. It showed me passed out on the table. And then it showed Maria. The room went dead silent. Not a whisper. Not a breath. On the screen, the cripple pushed herself up from the wheelchair. She stood. She stretched. She walked. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was a sound of pure shock. Oh my God, Mrs. Higgins whispered. On the screen, Maria walked to the bedroom and returned in the red dress. The guests watched mesmerized as the woman sitting in the wheelchair, 10 feet away from them, strutted across the screen in stiletto heels. Then, Marcus entered the frame on the screen. The affair was laid bare. The kiss, the laughter, the mocking comments about the old fool. I looked at the real Marcus. He was staring at the screen, his mouth open, his face pale as ash. He looked at the door, calculating his escape. But he knew he could not run. Not with 50 witnesses. I looked at the real Maria. She was not crying anymore. She was staring at the screen with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask had fallen off. There was no point in pretending. But I was not done. Wait, I said to the crowd. There is more. Skip ahead to yesterday. I pressed the button. The video skipped. The timestamp changed to Thursday. The screen showed the kitchen. It showed Maria standing at the counter, standing grinding pills with a mortar and pestle. The audio was crisp. "He is getting suspicious, Marcus. We cannot wait for the heart attack naturally. We have to accelerate the timeline." The crowd recoiled. People stepped back from Maria, as if she were radioactive. "I have the digoxin. If I give him a triple dose mixed with his morning coffee." "Yes, it will look like cardiac arrest." The video cut to black. I turned back to the crowd. "She is not just a cheater," I said, my voice shaking with the rage I had suppressed for 3 days. "She is a murderer in the making, and Marcus is her accomplice. They wanted me to sign these papers tonight so they could kill me tomorrow." "Lies!" Maria shrieked. She forgot herself. She forgot the chair. In a moment of pure panic and fury, she reacted instinctively. She threw the blanket off her legs and surged upward. It was the final nail in her coffin. Maria stood up in the middle of the party. She stood up to lunge at me, her hands curled into claws. "You bastard!" she screamed, taking 2 steps toward me. Then she froze. She realized what she had done. She realized she was standing in front of 50 people who had spent the last 2 years pitying her. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and crushing. It was the sound of a total structural collapse. "Sit down, Maria," I said coldly. "You are tired. Remember?" Marcus bolted. He saw the game was over. He shoved a waiter aside, knocking a tray of glasses to the floor, and ran for the front door. "He is running!" someone shouted. "Let him go," I said calmly. Marcus threw open the front door and sprinted into the night. But he did not get far. From the darkness of the front lawn, floodlights snapped on, blindingly bright. "Federal agents!" a voice boomed from loudspeakers. "Get on the ground now!" I walked to the window. Through the glass, I saw Agent Miller's team swarming the driveway. Marcus was face down and the grass handcuffs clicking onto his wrists. I turned back to the room. Maria was standing there trembling, surrounded by the shattered remains of her deception. She looked small. She looked pathetic. "The police are at the back door too," I told her, "for the attempted murder charge, and the fraud, and the embezzlement." She looked at me, her eyes, searching for any trace of the husband who had washed her hair and carried her to bed. "James," she whispered, "please." "James is gone," I said. "You killed him on Tuesday." I turned my back on her. I walked over to the table where the champagne tower stood. I picked up a glass. "I propose a toast," I said to the stunned room. I raised the glass. "To the truth," I said, "and to self-preservation." I drank. The bubbles tasted sharp and cold. Behind me, the police burst into the room. The video on the screen faded to black, but the image of Maria grinding poison into a fine powder seemed to burn itself into the air of the room. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence. It was the vacuum before an explosion. Then the screaming started. It did not begin as a collective roar. It started with a single high-pitched shriek from Mrs. Higgins, who dropped her wineglass. The crystal shattered on the hardwood floor, and that sound broke the spell. The room erupted into chaos. Guests were scrambling backward, knocking over chairs, pushing away from the woman in the wheelchair, as if she were a loaded bomb. But Maria was not looking at them. She was looking at the remote control in my hand. It was the only evidence, the source of the broadcast, the thing that was stripping her skin off, layer by layer. Panic is a primitive force. It bypasses logic. It bypasses the carefully constructed lies of 2 years. In that moment, Maria forgot the script. She forgot the wheelchair. She forgot the performance that had defined our lives. She grasped the armrests of her titanium chair, her knuckles white, and she launched herself. It happened in slow motion for me, but for everyone else it must have looked like a miracle gone wrong. The woman who claimed she could not wiggle a toe propelled herself upward with the explosive power of a coiled spring. Her legs hidden under the blue silk drove her forward. She did not stumble. She did not wobble. She lunged. She covered the 6 feet between us in 2 strides, her high heels clacking sharply against the floor. "Give it to me!" she shrieked, her voice unrecognizable. It was a guttural, feral sound. She reached for the remote, her fingers clawing at my hand. I stepped back calmly. I had anticipated this. I knew the yield point. I knew exactly how much pressure it would take to make the structure fail. "You are standing, Maria," I said loudly, my voice cutting through the din. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Maria froze. Her hand was suspended in midair, inches from my chest. She blinked, the adrenaline haze clearing just enough for reality to rush in. She looked down at her feet. She looked at the wheelchair, now empty, and rolling backwards slightly from the force of her launch. She looked at the 50 faces, staring at her with a mixture of horror and revulsion. The paralyzed woman was standing tall in the center of the room, her posture perfect, her balance absolute. "Oh my God," Tom whispered from the front row. "She can walk." "She is not just walking," I said, locking eyes with her. "She is attacking." The realization broke Maria. The shame did not make her retreat, it made her dangerous. A cornered animal does not beg, it bites. Her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. The beautiful, tragic wife vanished, replaced by a snarling creature I did not know. "You ruined everything," she screamed. "You pathetic old fool." She threw herself at me. This was not a slap. This was an assault. Her hands, manicured with sharp, red-painted nails, went for my eyes. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to erase the witness. I caught her wrists. I did not use excessive force. I used simple leverage. I am a large man, a man who has spent 40 years climbing scaffolding and inspecting steel beams. She was a woman who had spent 2 years pretending to be weak. Her muscles were real, but her leverage was poor. I held her wrists away from my face. She thrashed, spitting and kicking at my shins with her heels. "Let me go," she screeched. "Marcus, help me kill him." I looked past her struggling form toward Marcus. Marcus was standing near the fireplace. His face was a sheet of gray sweat. He looked at the front door, then at the back door. He saw the guests blocking the exits, their phones raised, recording everything. He saw his life disintegrating. The cartel money, the Florida land, the Swiss accounts. It was all turning to ash. Desperation is a volatile fuel. Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo. I expected a phone. I expected him to call a lawyer. Instead, he pulled out a switchblade. The blade snapped open with a metallic click that was audible even over the screaming guests. It was a small knife, maybe 4 inches, but in the hands of a desperate man it was deadly. "Get back!" Marcus shouted, waving the knife wildly. "Everyone get back!" The crowd surged away from him, creating a wide circle. A woman fainted near the buffet table. "Let her go, James!" Marcus snarled, stepping toward me. "Let her go, or I will gut you right here." I looked at the knife. Then I looked at Marcus. He was shaking. His center of gravity was high. He was reacting emotionally, not tactically. I shoved Maria backward. She stumbled in her heels, flailing her arms to keep her balance, and fell hard onto the sofa behind her. "It is over, Marcus," I said, standing my ground. "The police are outside. Put the knife down." "I am not going to prison," he yelled. He lunged at me. It was a clumsy attack. He led with the knife, his arm extended too far, his body off balance. He thought I was an old man. He thought I was the useful idiot who sat in a chair and drank poisoned tea. He forgot that before I was a structural engineer, I worked on demolition crews. I knew how to bring things down. I did not retreat. I stepped into his guard. As his arm came down, I sidestepped to the left. I caught his wrist with my left hand, controlling the weapon, and simultaneously drove my right forearm into his chest. It was not a strike to injure. It was a redirect of momentum. I hooked my right leg behind his right ankle. Physics took over. Marcus was moving forward. I stopped his upper body while blocking his lower body. His momentum had nowhere to go but down. I swept his leg. Marcus went airborne. His feet left the ground. He rotated in the air, his eyes wide with shock. He crashed face first into the large glass coffee table that sat in the center of the seating area. Crash. The sound was sickening. The tempered glass exploded into thousands of diamonds. Marcus hit the frame with a thud that shook the floor. The knife skittered across the room, sliding under the buffet table. Marcus lay amidst the shards, groaning, clutching his face. He was not dead, but he was broken. The fight had gone out of him the moment gravity claimed its due. "Stay down," I commanded. At that exact moment, the French doors leading to the garden burst open. "Federal agents, nobody move." Agent Jack Miller led the charge, his weapon drawn, but pointed low. Behind him streamed a tactical team in body armor, moving with the precision of a machine. At the same time, the front door crashed open, and uniformed police officers flooded the foyer. The guests raised their hands, pressing themselves against the walls. The music had stopped long ago, but the room was now filled with the squawk of police radios and the heavy stomp of boots. "Secure the suspect," Miller barked, pointing at Marcus. Two agents hauled Marcus out of the glass wreckage. He was bleeding from a cut on his cheek, his tuxedo shredded. They slammed him against the wall and zip-tied his hands behind his back. "James Garcia?" Miller asked, though he knew exactly who I was. "I am here," I said, adjusting my jacket. I was breathing hard, but my pulse was steady. Another figure entered the room behind the police. It was Dr. Alistair Thorne. He was wearing his white coat, looking like the grim reaper of medical fraud. He walked straight to where Maria was huddled on the sofa, trying to pull her dress down to cover her legs, trying to shrink back into the role of the victim. It was too late. Dr. Thorne stood over her. He did not offer a hand. He offered a diagnosis. "Officer," Dr. Thorne said to the nearest policeman, "I am Dr. Alistair Thorne, Chief of Orthopedic Trauma at St. Jude's Hospital. I am here to formally attest that this woman, Maria Garcia, has no physical disability preventing her from walking. Her paralysis is a fabrication. I have the medical imaging to prove it." Maria looked up at the doctor with venom in her eyes. "You violated doctor-patient confidentiality," she hissed. "You forfeited that right when you used my hospital to facilitate a felony," Thorne replied coldly. A female officer approached Maria. "Maria Garcia, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and embezzlement. Stand up." Maria did not move. She sat there defiant. "I said stand up," the officer repeated. "We all know you can do it." When Maria refused, the officer grabbed her arm and hauled her to her feet. This time there was no applause. There was only the click of handcuffs. They dragged her to the center of the room, past the shattered table, past the guests, who were now filming the entire scene on their phones. I stood in her path. The officer paused, letting me have my moment. Maria looked terrible. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks. Her hair was coming loose. The red lipstick she had applied so carefully for her lover was smeared across her chin. She looked at me. For a second, I thought she might apologize. I thought she might beg. But the rot in the foundation went all the way to the bedrock. "You are a monster," she spat at me. "You set me up. You made me do this." I looked at her and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The betrayal was gone. There was only the cold, hard clarity of a job finished. "I did not make you do anything, Maria," I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it carried like a bell. "I gave you a home. I gave you a life. I gave you my trust." I pointed to the shattered glass on the floor. "You are a very good actress," I continued. "But you forgot the first principle of engineering. Every material has a limit. Every beam has a breaking point. You tested mine for 2 years. You applied pressure every single day. You thought I was infinite. You were wrong." I leaned in closer, so only she could hear. My tolerance for bullshit expired last Tuesday. "Get him away from me!" she screamed, thrashing in the officer's grip. "He is insane. He poisoned himself." "Actually," Agent Miller interrupted, stepping forward, holding a plastic evidence bag. Inside was the jar of powder Maria had hidden behind the flour canister. "We have the digoxin, and we have the video of you grinding it, and we have the audio of you planning the dosage." Maria stared at the bag. The blood drained from her face. The fight went out of her. She sagged in the officer's grip, a puppet whose strings had finally been cut. "Get her out of here," Miller ordered. As they marched her toward the door, she passed Marcus. The agents were hauling him out, his face bloody, his eyes wild. "You stupid bitch!" Marcus screamed at her. "This was your plan. You said he was stupid. You said he was blind." "Shut up," Maria screamed back. "You were the one who got greedy. You were the one who wanted the land." "He played us," Marcus yelled, spitting blood on the floor. "The old man played us." They turned on each other like rats in a bucket. The love affair, the passion, the timeline. It all evaporated the moment the handcuffs clicked. There was no loyalty among thieves, only blame. I watched them go. I watched the flashing lights of the police cruisers wash over the walls of my living room. Blue, red, blue, red. The guests were starting to whisper now, a low hum of shock and gossip that would spread through the city by morning. "James," Mrs. Higgins said, coming up to me. She touched my arm. Are you okay?" I looked around the room. The flowers were knocked over. The champagne was spilled. The glass table was a pile of dust. My anniversary party was a crime scene. "I am fine, Martha," I said, unbuttoning my tuxedo jacket. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of expensive perfume and cheap desperation, but underneath it all I could finally smell the truth. "I am better than fine," I said. "I am standing." I walked over to the buffet table, picked up a clean glass, and poured myself a shot of whiskey. My hand did not shake. The structure had collapsed. The rubble was everywhere. But the demolition was successful. The dangerous elements had been removed. Now, and only now, could the rebuilding begin. In the aftermath of a controlled demolition, there is a period of time that engineers call settling. The dust hangs in the air, thick and choking. The noise of the blast still rings in your ears. The adrenaline fades, leaving behind a profound physical exhaustion. But it is in this silence, amidst the twisted rebar and shattered concrete, that the real work begins. You have to clear the debris before you can even think about breaking ground on something new. For me, the debris was not made of brick and mortar. It was made of depositions, affidavits, and court hearings. Usually, the American legal system moves with the speed of a glacier. Cases drag on for years, fueled by continuances and motions to dismiss. But I had engineered this case as carefully as I engineered my bridges. I had not given them a single crack to exploit. I had handed the district attorney a structural failure, so complete, so documented, that there was no defense strategy in the world that could shore it up. The video evidence from the black box drive was the cornerstone. The footage of Maria standing, walking, and dancing was enough to secure the fraud conviction. But the footage of her grinding the digoxin, combined with the audio of her plotting the dosage, elevated the charges to a different stratosphere. Maria was denied bail. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly seen the viral video of the miracle at the party, looked at Maria with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. She was charged with first-degree attempted murder, grand larceny, insurance fraud, and 3 counts of medical forgery. The prosecutor was asking for the maximum sentence, 20 years. It was ironic. Maria had spent 2 years pretending to be a prisoner in her own body. Now, she was going to spend the next 2 decades as a prisoner of the state. Marcus fared no better. The tough, suave businessman crumbled the moment the handcuffs clicked. He did not have the structural integrity to withstand pressure. Within 48 hours of his arrest, he flipped. He offered the feds everything: the cartel connections, the offshore accounts, the names of the corrupt real estate agents he worked with, in exchange for a plea deal. He also threw Maria to the wolves. In his deposition, which my lawyer read to me, Marcus claimed he was a victim of her manipulation. He claimed she was the mastermind, the Black Widow, who seduced him into helping her kill her husband. It was pathetic. It was cowardly. And it sealed his fate. He was looking at 15 years for money laundering and conspiracy federal time. 2 weeks after the party, I went to see her. My friends told me not to go. Dr. Thorne told me it was unnecessary torture. Even Agent Miller suggested I just let the lawyers handle it. But I needed to see the site one last time. I needed to verify that the hazard was contained. The Cook County Jail is a bleak place. It smells of industrial cleaner and unwashed bodies. I sat in a small visitation room, separated from the other side by a thick sheet of scratched plexiglass. I wore my best suit. I wanted her to see the man she had tried to destroy, the man who was still standing. When the guard brought her in, I almost didn't recognize her. Without the professional makeup, the hair extensions, and the designer clothes, Maria looked ordinary. She looked older than her 52 years. Her roots were showing gray streaks in the dyed brunette hair. Her skin was sallow. She wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame, the frame she had kept fit with secret workouts, now slumped in defeat. She sat down. She did not look at me. She looked at her hands, which were clasped together on the metal table. "Hello, Maria," I said. My voice was calm. She flinched. She looked up, and I saw the tears welling in her eyes. They were not the practiced pretty tears she had used to manipulate me for years. These were ugly, desperate tears. "James," she choked out. She reached for the glass, pressing her palm against it. "James, please. You have to help me. I can't survive in here. These women, they are animals. They are going to kill me." "You are a survivor, Maria," I said. "You survived a debilitating neurological disease that didn't exist. I am sure you can survive a cell block." "Don't be cruel," she sobbed. "I know you are angry. You have every right to be. But think about what we had. 30 years, James. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means everything," I said. "It means I wasted 3 decades on a phantom." "It wasn't all a lie," she insisted, her voice rising to a desperate pitch. "I loved you. In the beginning, I really loved you, but then you got so busy with the firm. You were always working. I was lonely. And then Marcus, he manipulated me, James. He got into my head. He told me you didn't appreciate me. He told me we deserved more." I watched her spin the narrative, trying to find a footing, trying to find a lever she could pull to open my heart. But the mechanism was rusted shut. "Marcus says you were the mastermind," I said. "He says you came up with the idea for the poisoning. He says you joked about the old fool dying of a heart attack." Maria's face twisted. The sorrow vanished, replaced by a flash of that familiar venom. "Marcus is a lying coward. He wanted the money just as much as I did. He is the one who bought the pills." She realized she had slipped. She stopped, taking a jagged breath. "James," she whispered, leaning closer to the glass. "I can fix this. If you drop the charges, tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I was mentally unstable. We can get me into a psychiatric facility. Please. I will sign whatever you want. I will go away. Just don't let them lock me up with these people." I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't hate. It wasn't anger. It was pity. I felt sorry for her. She had possessed everything: a home, a husband who adored her, a life of comfort, and she had thrown it all away for a cheap thrill and a pile of money she didn't need. She was a hollow structure, a facade with nothing behind it but greed. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. I slid it through the slot at the bottom of the window. "What is this?" she asked, wiping her nose. "These are divorce papers," I said. "My lawyer drafted them. They are based on fault grounds, adultery, attempted murder, and fraud. You get nothing, no alimony, no assets, no claim on the pension." She stared at the envelope. "And there is one more thing inside," I added. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. She pulled out the legal documents, and then a single piece of paper fluttered onto the table. It was a hospital bill. She picked it up. She frowned, confused. $380, she read. "That is the bill for the X-ray Dr. Thorne took of your ankle," I said. "I paid it this morning." She looked up at me, bewildered. "I wanted you to have it," I said, standing up. "It is the most expensive photograph ever taken. It cost you your freedom. It cost you your marriage. It cost you $5 million. I thought you should keep it as a souvenir." I buttoned my jacket. "James, wait!" she screamed, slapping the glass. "Don't leave me here, James." I turned and walked toward the heavy steel door. I did not look back. I heard her screaming my name, her voice echoing off the concrete walls, but it sounded distant, like a radio playing in another room. By the time the door clanged shut behind me, the silence had returned. The next step was the house. I could not live there anymore. Every room was tainted. The kitchen where she poisoned me, the living room where she mocked me, the bedroom where she betrayed me. It was a beautiful house, an architectural marvel, but it was haunted by the living. I hired a staging company to clear it out. I told them to sell everything: the furniture, the art, the customized elevator, the wheelchair ramp. I wanted it stripped to the studs. When the real estate agent brought me the offer, I didn't haggle. It was a young couple, an architect and a teacher. They walked through the empty rooms with stars in their eyes, talking about where they would put the nursery, how they would paint the walls. They saw a future. I saw a crime scene. I signed the deed and handed over the keys. When I walked out of that front door for the last time, I felt a physical weight lift off my shoulders. The dead load was gone, but I still had the money. The $4 million I had transferred to Elena's trust, plus the money from the house sale. It was a significant sum. Technically, it was mine. I had earned it. But it felt dirty. It felt like blood money stained by the plot that had almost killed me. I knew I couldn't spend it on a sports car or a vacation. I needed to use it to reinforce something good. I made an appointment with the Dean of Engineering at the State University. I also invited Dr. Thorne to join us. When I told them what I wanted to do, Dr. Thorne dropped his coffee cup. "A scholarship?" Thorne asked, staring at me. "2 scholarships," I corrected. "The Thorne Garcia Initiative. Half the fund goes to support students from underprivileged backgrounds studying structural engineering. The other half goes to students specializing in orthopedic medicine and forensic pathology." "James," Thorne said, his voice thick with emotion, "you don't have to put my name on it." "You saved my life, Alistair," I said. "You asked the question. You saw the crack when I was too blind to look. If not for you, I would be dead, and they would be drinking martinis on a beach in Brazil. Your name goes first. We set up the endowment. It was enough to put 20 kids through college every year forever. It was a legacy. It was a way to ensure that the next generation of engineers and doctors would know how to look for the hidden flaws, how to test the timeline, how to find the truth. Finally, there was the company. Garcia and Partners was my life's work, but under Marcus's leadership for the last 2 years, it had begun to rot. He had hired people like himself, flashy, arrogant, more interested in the profit margin than the safety factor. They cut corners. They ignored regulations. I returned to the office on a Monday morning. I didn't need a key card. I owned the building. I called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. The room was packed. I saw the faces of the people Marcus had brought in, men in sharp suits, who checked their phones constantly. And in the back, I saw the others. The older engineers who had been with me since the beginning. The young, quiet ones who spent their lunch breaks reading code updates. I stood at the head of the table. I didn't have a PowerPoint presentation. As of this morning, I announced, Marcus Vane is no longer associated with this firm. He has been indicted on federal charges. A murmur went through the room. Furthermore, I continued, I am instituting a forensic audit of every project commissioned in the last 24 months. If we find a single cut corner, a single bribed inspector, or a single safety violation, the project manager responsible will be terminated immediately. I looked at the Marcus crew in the front row. They looked nervous. In fact, I said, I have a list here of 5 senior project managers who are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Security will escort you to your desks to collect your personal effects. I read the names. They were Marcus's lieutenants. They protested, they shouted, they threatened to sue. I just pointed to the door where the security guards were waiting. When they were gone, the room felt lighter, cleaner. I looked at the people remaining. I spotted a young woman in the back, Sarah. She was a junior engineer, quiet, brilliant. I had seen her work on the suspension analysis for the river bridge. Marcus had passed her over for promotion 3 times. Sarah, I said. Step forward. She looked terrified. Yes, Mr. Garcia. You caught the load calculation error on the West Side project last month, didn't you? The one your supervisor ignored. She nodded slowly. Yes, sir. You are the new lead engineer for that division, I said. Her jaw dropped. Me, but I am only 26. I don't care how old you are, I said. I care that you know the math. I care that you respect the physics. And I care that you tell the truth. I looked around the room. That is the new standard at Garcia and Partners, I told them. We don't build for profit. We don't build for ego. We build for safety. We build things that stand when the storm comes. Because I have learned the hard way what happens when you build on a lie. I walked back to my office, my real office, which Marcus had turned into a bachelor pad of leather and chrome. I sat down at my desk. It was covered in dust. I took a tissue and wiped the surface clean. I set up my laptop. I opened a new file. The screen was blank, white, clean. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. I was 62 years old. I was single. I was living in a hotel. I had given away most of my money. But for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't carrying the weight of a dying wife. I wasn't carrying the guilt of a failing husband. I wasn't carrying the lies of a treacherous son. I was light. I looked out the window, at the Chicago skyline, at the buildings I had helped build. They stood tall against the gray sky, rigid, strong, defiant. I picked up my pen. It was time to draft a new blueprint. The water of Lake Superior is cold enough to preserve a shipwreck for a century. It is a vast, flat mirror of steel gray that stretches out to the horizon, indifferent to the lives of the men who stand on its shores. I come here often now. I sit on the end of this weathered wooden dock, a fishing rod in my hand, and I watch the line cut through the surface tension of the water. It has been exactly 1 year since the party. 1 year since the glass table shattered. 1 year since the police lights washed away the facade of my previous life. I look different. I know I do. I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror of my truck this morning. The man looking back at me was not the soft-tired caregiver who shuffled through his own house in slippers, terrified of waking his wife. That man is dead. The man in the mirror has deep lines etched around his eyes, lines carved by hard truths and hard weather. My hair is completely white now, stripped of its last few dark strands by the stress of the trial. But my eyes are clear. The fog of the sedatives, the fog of the lies, and the fog of my own willful blindness has lifted. I reel in the lines slowly, feeling the resistance of the water. No fish today. That is fine. I am not here for the catch. I am here for the quiet. For 62 years, I thought I understood the laws of the universe. I was an engineer. I believed that if you calculated the load correctly, if you poured the concrete with the right mixture, if you torqued the bolts to the exact specification, the structure would stand. I believed that the world was rational. I believed that if you gave love, you received loyalty. I believed that if you sacrificed, you were rewarded. I was a fool. I put down the rod and pick up the thermos of coffee I brought with me. It is black, bitter, and hot. It wakes up the senses. I have spent the last 12 months thinking about a single concept. In biology, they call it self-preservation. It is the most primal instinct in every living thing. A single-celled organism will move away from a toxin. A deer will run from the scent of a wolf. A child will pull their hand away from a hot stove. It is the fundamental programming of life survive. Protect the vessel. But somewhere along the way, we humans, especially those of us who call ourselves providers or protectors, we override that code. We are taught that self-sacrifice is the highest virtue. We are taught to set ourselves on fire to keep others warm. I did that. I threw my career, my health, my sleep, and my sanity into the fire to keep Maria warm. And she stood there, warming her hands, laughing as I burned. I realized something sitting out here on this dock. Loving someone else should never mean destroying yourself. That is not love. That is parasitism. In engineering, we have a concept called the safety factor. When we design a bridge that needs to carry 10 tons, we do not build it to hold 10 tons. We build it to hold 30 tons. We build in a buffer. We assume that the winds will be stronger than predicted, that the traffic will be heavier than expected, that the materials will degrade over time. We protect the structure from the unknown. I failed to apply a safety factor to my marriage. I built it to the limit. I gave 100% of my capacity to Maria, leaving zero reserve for myself. So when the extra load came, the lies, the betrayal, the poison, there was nothing left to hold me up. I collapsed. But I have rebuilt. I reach into the pocket of my canvas jacket. My fingers close around a small cold circle of metal. I pull it out and hold it up to the pale sunlight. It is my wedding band, gold, heavy, inscribed with a date that now feels like it belongs to a different century. I have carried this ring in my pocket for a year. I took it off my finger the night of the arrest, but I could not bring myself to get rid of it. I told myself I was keeping it as evidence, a reminder of the mistake. But that was a lie. I was keeping it because part of me was still mourning the woman I thought she was. I was mourning the phantom. Trust is a beautiful thing. It is the mortar that holds civilization together. But trust without verification is negligence. I look at the ring. It is just metal. It is just an alloy of gold and copper. It has no power over me unless I give it power. I learned a hard lesson, but it is a lesson that might save me in the years I have left. You cannot let a relationship go uninspected. You would never drive a car for 30 years without checking the brakes. You would never live in a house for 30 years without checking the foundation for termites. So why do we think we can live with a person for 30 years without ever checking the truth of who they are? We get lazy. We get comfortable. We assume that because they were good yesterday, they are good today. We ignore the hairline cracks. We ignore the rust stains. We ignore the doctor who asks about the timeline. We tell ourselves it is fine. It is just a little settling. It is just a rough patch, until the roof caves in. I stand up. The wood of the dock creaks under my boots. I am a big man, but I feel light today. I hold the ring between my thumb and forefinger. I do not feel anger anymore. Anger is a hot emotion. It requires energy to sustain. I do not have energy to waste on Maria. She is sitting in a cell in a federal penitentiary, wearing an orange jumpsuit, probably telling her sob story to anyone who will listen. She is a closed case file. She is a demolished building. The site has been cleared. I feel peace. I pull my arm back. I use the mechanics of my shoulder, the rotation of my hip, the snap of my wrist. I throw the ring. It arcs high into the air, catching the sun one last time, a glittering gold spark against the gray sky. It hits the water 50 yards out. Plip. A tiny splash. A few ripples that spread outward, circle after circle, getting wider and fainter, until they disappear completely into the vastness of the lake. Gone. It does not sink with a dramatic crash. It just slips beneath the surface, down into the cold, dark silt where it belongs. I stand there for a moment watching the water return to stillness. I take a deep breath of the cold, clean air. It tastes like freedom. I turn around and pick up my tackle box. I grab the rod. I walk back down the dock toward the gravel parking lot where my truck is waiting. It is an old Ford rusted around the wheel wells, but the engine is solid. I rebuilt it myself last month. I know every bolt, every hose, every wire. It is reliable. I am not going back to the city. I sold the penthouse I bought after the house sale. I do not need the noise. I do not need the skyline. I have a new project. I toss my gear into the truck bed and climb into the cab. On the passenger seat sits a roll of blueprints. They are not for a skyscraper. They are not for a corporate headquarters. They are for a school. I am heading to a small town in the Appalachian Mountains, a place where the coal mines have closed and the bridges are crumbling, a place where the kids sit in classrooms with leaking roofs and outdated heating. I am using the money, Maria's money, Marcus's money, my money to build them a new science and technology center. I am going to be the project manager. I am going to be the lead engineer. I am going to be the guy in the hard hat, pouring the coffee at 6 in the morning. I am going to build something that matters, something that nurtures potential instead of extracting value, something that stands strong, not because it is hiding secrets, but because it is built on the bedrock of generosity and truth. I start the engine. The truck rumbles to life, a low, steady growl. I put it in gear and pull out onto the dirt road. The dust kicks up behind me, obscuring the view of the lake. I do not look back. There is nothing back there for me but water and memories. The windshield is clear. The road ahead is open. As I drive, I think about the people out there who are still in the dark. The husbands who are working themselves to death for wives who despise them. The wives who are ignoring the lipstick on the collar because they are afraid of the truth. The parents who are blinded by love for children who see them only as ATM machines. I wish I could shake them. I wish I could hand them my jeweler's loupe and say, "Look closer." But I know they have to see it for themselves. You cannot force someone to see a crack they are determined to ignore. All you can do is hope that when the collapse happens, they survive the fall. I survived. I am scarred. I am older. I am solitary. But I am standing. And for the first time in a long time, I am driving toward a destination of my own choosing. Voiceover. Do not ever let love blind you to the red flags waving right in front of your face. If your gut tells you something is wrong, it is. If the math does not add up, do not force the numbers to fit. If a doctor or a friend or a stranger looks at your life and tells you that the timeline does not make sense, listen to them. Because the truth is always there, hiding in the small details, the dust in a tire tread, the wear on a shoe, the silence in a room. Self-preservation is not selfishness. It is the only duty you cannot delegate to anyone else. Protect your heart. Protect your life. And never ever give the keys to your foundation to someone who has not proven they are worthy of holding them. Hook. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it serves as a blueprint for your own safety. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Are you in your car at work? Or maybe fishing by a lake like me? Let me know in the comments below and share your own stories of survival. If you believe that truth should always be brought to light, please subscribe to the channel Bittersweet Revenge. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and keep your eyes open.